Dust devils danced across the cracked red earth of southern Arizona like restless spirits the afternoon Maria Yazzie walked out of the reservation with nothing but the clothes on her back and her grandmother's silver bracelet tight around her wrist. 18 years old, black hair whipping in the hot wind, eyes older than the desert itself, she followed the two-lane highway west because every other direction had already betrayed her. Behind her lay a trailer with no electricity, a mother lost to the bottle, and a little brother the state had taken at dawn. In front of her stretched nothing but barbed wire, saguaro skeletons, and a sky so wide it swallowed hope whole. 10 miles bled into 20. The sun hammered her shadow into a thin, trembling line. When the first thunder growled over the Chiricahua Mountains, she did not quicken her step. She had learned long ago that running only made the herding chase faster. That was when she saw the sign half buried in tumbleweed, Lazy J Ranch, trespassers shot on sight. The shot on sight part had been crossed out years ago and replaced with a faded welcome. She almost laughed. Welcome was a word people used when they still had something left to give. The storm broke just as she reached the sagging gate. Rain came sideways, stinging like thrown gravel. Lightning stitched the sky white, and in that flash she saw him, a lone man on a half-collapsed porch, fighting to nail a blue tarp over a leaking roof while the wind tried to tear the house apart plank by plank. He was all elbows and stubbornness, maybe 35, sunburned neck, patched canvas coat 2 sizes too big, boots held together by baling wire and prayer. Maria stood soaked and shivering under the cottonwood, watching him lose the battle. Another gust ripped the tarp free and flung it into the dark like a wounded bird. The man cursed once, short, tired, almost gentle, and sat down hard on the top step, head in his hands as the rain punished him. Something cracked open inside her chest. She knew that kind of tired. She had worn it since she was 7. She stepped out of the tree's dripping shelter and walked straight up the muddy path. Water streamed off her braided hair, off the frayed hem of her jeans. When she was 5 feet away, the man noticed her at last. He rose slowly, one hand instinctively moving toward the empty space on his belt where a sidearm used to ride before the bank took everything but the land and the debt. His eyes, storm gray like the sky itself, took her in, the proud lift of her chin, the defiance flickering under the exhaustion. "Evening," he said, voice rough as cedar bark. Lightning flashed again. Thunder followed on its heels. Maria lifted her face to the rain and asked the question that had been burning her throat for the last 20 miles. "How much for one night?" The man blinked. Rainwater ran off the brim of his hat and down the lines in his forehead. For a long moment the only sound was the storm tearing at the world. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I think you got the wrong idea about what kind of place this is." She reached into her pocket with shaking fingers and pulled out the only money she had left, 2 crumpled 20s and a handful of quarters that added up to $47.32. She held it out, palm up, letting the rain soak the bills. "I'm not selling anything," she said. "I'm buying. One night. Dry floor. Maybe a corner by the stove. That's all." He stared at the money like it might bite him. Then he looked at her, really looked, and saw the split lip she tried to hide, the bruise blooming along her jaw, the way her left hand kept touching the bracelet as if it were the last real thing in the universe. "Name's Caleb Whitaker," he said at last. "And I don't take money from folks who need it worse than I do." He stepped aside and held the screen door open against the wind. The inside of the house smelled of coffee, old leather, and wet dog, though no dog appeared. A single lamp glowed on a table made from a cable spool. The living room doubled as kitchen, bedroom, and everything else. A cast-iron stove fought valiantly against the damp. On the wall hung a photograph of a younger Caleb in dress blues standing beside a dark-haired woman whose smile could have powered the county. Maria hesitated on the threshold. "I can sleep in the barn," she offered. "Barn's got a worse roof than the house," Caleb said. "You'll stay here." Couch pulls out. "I'll take the floor." She opened her mouth to argue, "Apache girls do not accept charity," her grandmother's voice whispered, but the warmth rolling off the stove reached her bones and her knees nearly buckled. Caleb turned his back to give her privacy while she peeled off the soaked denim jacket. He busied himself filling an enamel pot with water, setting it on the stove, moving with the deliberate calm of a man who had long ago stopped expecting good things but hadn't quite learned how to stop preparing for them. When he faced her again, he held out a faded flannel shirt 3 sizes too big. "It was my wife's," he said simply. No explanation, no apology. Maria took it. The sleeves swallowed her hands. The scent, sunlight and horse and something faintly floral, made her throat tighten. They didn't speak much that first hour. The storm raged outside like it wanted to wash the whole ranch off the face of the earth. Caleb made coffee thick enough to patch tires. Maria wrapped her fingers around the mug and let the heat travel all the way to her heart. Eventually he asked, "You running from someone?" She thought about lying. Instead she touched the bruise on her jaw. "From everything." He nodded like that was answer enough. Later, when the thunder moved east and the rain settled into a steady drumming on the tin roof, Caleb dragged an ancient army cot from a back room and set it up on the opposite side of the stove. "I snore," he warned. "I've slept through worse," she said. Before he killed the lamp, he placed something on the table between them, a bowl of pinto beans simmering with salt pork, a pan of cornbread still hot from the oven, and 2 mismatched spoons. "Help yourself," he said. "Ain't fancy, but it's paid for." Maria hadn't eaten in 2 days. She tried to be polite, but hunger won. She ate until her stomach ached in a new, grateful way. When she looked up, Caleb was watching her with the softest expression she had ever seen on a man's face. "Thank you," she whispered. He only nodded and turned away to hide whatever had risen in his eyes. That night Maria lay on the pull-out couch under a quilt stitched with tiny faded stars and listened to the rain and to Caleb breathing steady on the other side of the stove. For the first time since they took her brother, she did not dream of losing. Dawn came pale and embarrassed, as if the desert regretted its tantrum. Maria woke to the smell of frying eggs and the low murmur of a radio reporting flash flood warnings. Caleb stood at the stove flipping breakfast with the same quiet concentration he'd used to fight the storm. She sat up, clutching the quilt. "I should go," she said. Caleb slid eggs onto 2 tin plates without looking at her. "Roads washed out south of the arroyo. You'd be walking through knee-deep mud for 10 miles before you hit pavement. Sit. Eat." She sat. Over breakfast he told her, in the sideways way men do when they don't want pity, that the bank had scheduled the foreclosure auction for the following month. 160 acres, 3 generations of Whitakers, gone because the cattle market crashed and the well went dry, and his wife, Sarah, had needed treatments that insurance laughed at. Sarah was buried now under the cottonwood by the gate, waiting for the bank to take even that. Maria listened without interrupting, the way her grandmother had taught her, eyes down, heart open. When he finished, the kitchen felt too small for all the sorrow hanging in the air. "I'm sorry," she said. "Me too." He cleared the plates. "But sorry don't pay the note." After breakfast he asked if she knew how to ride. She almost smiled. "I was breaking horses when I was 8. Something sparked in his tired eyes. "Good. Fence lines down on the north pasture. Storm took half of it. Could use another pair of hands if you're willing." She was willing. They worked all morning under a sky scrubbed clean. Maria coiled wire, stretched it tight, drove staples with swings that would shame most men. Caleb watched her once, shook his head in wonder, and handed her the heavier post maul without a word. By noon the sun was brutal again, but the fence stood proud and straight. They sat in the shade of a mesquite to eat the sandwiches Caleb had packed, thick slices of last night's cornbread with jelly from a jar labeled Sarah's Blackberry, 2022. Maria turned the jar in her hands. "She made this? Best blackberry jelly in Cochise County," he said. "Won blue ribbons before, well. Before." Maria opened the lid, breathed in summer, and felt tears threaten for a woman she had never met. That afternoon the unexpected turn came wearing a county badge. A sheriff's cruiser bumped up the washed-out drive just as Caleb was showing Maria how to gentle a nervous bay mare that had survived the storm. The deputy, young and apologetic, handed Caleb a thick envelope. 30 days, Caleb. I'm real sorry. Bank's done talking. Caleb took the papers with fingers that didn't shake, but Maria saw the pulse hammering in his throat. After the cruiser left, he stood staring at the envelope like it might bite. Maria spoke first. How much do you owe? He laughed, a sound like dry sticks breaking. More than God and the U.S. Treasury combined. Tell me the number. He told her. $62,411. By the 15th of next month. She felt the desert spin around her. 62,000 was a fairy tale. 62,000 was impossible. That night they sat on the porch steps sharing a single beer because it was the last one. Crickets sang. Somewhere a coyote yipped at the moon. I could sell the bracelet, Maria said suddenly. Caleb frowned. Your grandmother's? It's turquoise and old silver. Tourist shops in Tucson pay stupid money for real Navajo work. She corrected herself. Apache. Western Apache. How much? I don't know. Maybe 800. 1,000 if they're drunk. He was quiet so long she thought he hadn't heard. That's a piece of your soul, he said finally. I'm not taking it. You didn't ask. I'm offering. No. The refusal was gentle but iron hard. She wanted to argue, but the way he said it reminded her of her grandfather refusing to leave the land when the government came with papers and promises. Some things you simply do not sell. 3 weeks slid by like warm honey. Maria stayed. She told herself it was only until the roads dried, then only until the calf with the broken leg healed, then only until the hay was in. She worked from can't see to can't see, branding, vaccinating, rebuilding the barn roof, laughing sometimes at Caleb's dry jokes, falling quiet when she caught him staring at Sarah's picture with that hollow look. He paid her nothing but meals and a roof, and she took nothing else. One night she found him in the barn long after midnight, sitting on a hay bale with his head in his hands. She sat beside him without speaking. After a while he said, voice raw, I keep thinking if I'd sold 2 years ago when they first offered, Sarah could have had the treatment in Houston. Maybe. Maria took his calloused hand. Maybe is a liar, she said. My grandmother taught me that. You did what love told you. That's never wrong. He turned to her then, and in the lantern light she saw tears cutting clean trails through the dust on his cheeks. Something shifted in the air between them, fragile as a soap bubble, bright as sunrise. The next morning she was gone. Caleb found only a note on the kitchen table weighted down by the silver bracelet. I'm borrowing your truck. Back by evening. Trust me. She returned at dusk in a cloud of dust driving not only his battered Ford but a gleaming white stock trailer behind it. When she stepped out, her eyes were red-rimmed but fierce. Open the barn, she said. Inside the trailer stood 12 of the finest registered black Angus cows Caleb had ever seen, big, healthy, shiny as polished obsidian. He couldn't speak. Maria handed him a bill of sale. The seller's name was Yazzie Land and Cattle, her uncle's outfit on the San Carlos reservation. The price listed was $1 and other valuable consideration. She said, my uncle owed me a favor from the day I pulled his sorry drunk ass out of a Tucson jail when I was 16. I called it in. Caleb found his voice. These cows are worth about $65,000 on the hoof, she finished. Auctions tomorrow in Wilcox. You sell 10, pay the bank, keep 2 for breeding. Ranch stays yours. He shook his head, stunned. Maria, this is your future. My future, she cut in, is standing right here watching a good man keep the land his wife loved. That's worth more than money. She reached out and closed his fingers around the bracelet. Besides, she said softly, grandmother always said real wealth is what you give away when it hurts the most. The auction the next day was standing room only. Ranchers who'd heard whispers crowded the pens. When the gavel finally fell, Caleb walked away with enough to pay the bank, seed the fields, and fix the well. He kept the 2 best heifers and named them Sarah and Maria. That evening he found Maria by the cottonwood grave, laying wildflowers she'd picked along the fence line. He stood behind her a long moment. "Stay," he said. It wasn't a question. She turned. The desert wind lifted her hair like a banner. "I'm not for sale, Caleb Whitaker," she teased, eyes shining. "Didn't offer money," he answered. "Offered a partnership. Half the ranch, half the work, half the worries. All the sunsets." She studied him, the quiet strength that had taken her in out of the storm, the heart big enough to refuse her sacrifice until she forced it on him anyway. Then she smiled, the first full, unguarded smile he had ever seen on her face, and it lit the twilight brighter than any lightning. "Deal," she said. "But I still get the couch when I snore." Years later, travelers on the old highway would slow down to read the new sign at the gate, Lazy J and Yazzie Ranch, partners in life and land. And if they were lucky, they might glimpse a tall man with storm-gray eyes and a dark-haired woman with a turquoise bracelet, riding the fence line together, checking cattle, laughing at some private joke while the desert wind carried their voices across the wide, healing land. And somewhere, an old Apache grandmother smiled in the spirit world, knowing the circle had come round. A lost girl had asked a broken man the price of one night, and together they discovered the true cost was everything they were willing to give. And that, in the giving, they became rich beyond counting. Because sometimes the poorest rancher and the most desperate girl find out that kindness isn't charity. It's the only currency that multiplies when you spend it. And one night, one single, unrepeatable night, can be worth a lifetime if